They didn't even ask her name. One moment, Jasmine Carter was walking home from her night shift at the diner. The next, she was shoved against a cold brick wall, her purse ripped from her hands, and a blinding beam of light burning into her eyes. "Don't move, lady," one of the officers barked. The word lady dripped with something that wasn't respect, more like the way someone talks to a stray dog. Jasmine's heart thundered in her chest, but not from guilt. She had done nothing. She had no stolen goods, no weapon, no reason to be treated like this other than the color of her skin. And in this part of the city, that was reason enough for some people. She tried to keep her voice steady. "What's going on? Why are you—" "Quiet," the shorter officer snapped. His nameplate read Keller. The taller one, Morris, stood just behind him, his hand resting on the butt of his gun like a threat he didn't need to speak aloud. People slowed down on the sidewalk, phones coming out. Some recorded. Most didn't. Some averted their eyes, pretending not to see. It had been like this for Jasmine since she was a kid, walking on eggshells around uniforms. Her mama always said, "You don't win against a badge, baby. You survive it." But tonight, survival tasted like humiliation, like asphalt dust in her mouth. Her breath misted in the cold air as Officer Keller began rifling through her purse without asking. Lip balm, tip money in a crumpled envelope, a bus pass. Nothing illegal, but that didn't stop him from tossing it on the ground like trash. "You match the description of a robbery suspect," Morris said, his tone flat, like reading from a script. "Black female, mid-20s, blue shirt, jeans." Jasmine let out a bitter laugh before she could stop herself. "Wow. That narrows it down to about half the women in this neighborhood." Keller's eyes narrowed. "Careful with your mouth." A drop of rain hit Jasmine's cheek, mingling with the heat rising in her skin. She had been tired before. Now, she was awake, angry, humiliated, but above all, done. "Can I make a phone call?" she asked, already pulling her phone from her pocket. "Put that down," Keller barked, stepping closer. His breath smelled of stale coffee. Jasmine held her ground. "I'm calling my father." Morris smirked. "Oh yeah? What's he gonna do, sue us?" She looked him dead in the eye. "He's not a lawyer. He's a former Delta Force operative." Something shifted in the air. Keller glanced at Morris, then back at her. They both tried to hide it, but Jasmine saw a flicker of uncertainty. Delta Force wasn't just military. It was the military's boogeyman. The guys who did the jobs no one talked about. She hit dial. The phone rang once. Twice. "Jazz." Her father's deep voice came through, steady as always. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling now, not from fear, but from the flood of relief. "I'm at the corner of 8th and Mason. 2 officers are detaining me. I haven't done anything." There was a pause. Then his voice, lower, sharper. "Stay where you are. I'm coming." Keller scoffed. "What, he gonna parachute in?" Jasmine didn't answer. She knew her father well enough to know if he said he was coming, things were about to change. The rain picked up, pattering against the asphalt. The crowd shifted, sensing a story about to unfold. Keller and Morris seemed to grow restless, checking their watches, their radios. Then, like a scene from a movie, he appeared. A tall figure cutting through the crowd, moving with a calm, deliberate stride. No uniform, but you didn't need one to see it had that military presence. Broad shoulders, weathered face, eyes like steel. "Jasmine," he said simply, stepping between her and the officers. His gaze never left them. Keller straightened up. "Sir, you have 30 seconds to tell me exactly why my daughter is standing here in the rain with her hands up," her father said, voice low, dangerous. Morris swallowed. "She matches the description." "That's not a reason. That's an excuse," her father cut in. He stepped closer, and though he didn't raise his voice, the authority in it was deafening. "Now, you're going to return her property, apologize, and file whatever report you need without putting her name in it." Or, he let the word hang in the air like a blade. No one spoke. The rain seemed to hush. Keller's jaw tightened, but he stooped to pick up Jasmine's purse, brushing off the wet gravel before handing it back. "Sorry, ma'am," he muttered. Morris nodded stiffly. "You're free to go." Her father took her arm gently, guiding her away. The crowd watched in silence as they disappeared into the night, the flashing lights fading behind them. Only when they were a block away did Jasmine let herself breathe. "Thanks, Dad." He glanced down at her, a small smile breaking the tension. "You don't ever thank me for protecting my own." But you remember this: when people see you as less than human, you show them who you are. And you never back down. She nodded, her fingers tightening around his hand. And for the first time that night, the rain didn't feel so cold. The streetlights glistened on the wet pavement as they walked, the hum of the city muted beneath the steady drumming of rain. Jasmine kept her head down, but her father David Carter walked like he was still on a mission. Even in civilian clothes, he had the posture of a man who'd spent years carrying more weight than any human should. "You okay to talk about it?" he asked without breaking stride. She hesitated. "Yeah, I guess I'm tired, Dad. Tired of this happening to me, to people like me. Tired of having to prove I'm not a criminal just to exist." David slowed, finally turning to look at her. "You shouldn't have to prove anything. That's the point." Jasmine stopped under the awning of a closed bodega, the neon sign above flickering weakly. "I thought maybe, I don't know. Maybe I was overreacting at first. But the way they looked at me, like I was already guilty. I swear, if you hadn't shown up." David's eyes softened. "If I hadn't shown up, I'd be visiting you in a holding cell right now." He didn't say it to scare her. He said it because it was the truth. She shivered, though it wasn't from the cold. "Do you think they'll just forget about it now?" His jaw tightened. "No. Cops like that don't forget being embarrassed in front of a crowd. And they sure as hell don't like being challenged by someone who knows how the system works." Jasmine frowned. "You think they'll come after me?" "I think," David said, his voice low, "that we need to be ready if they do." They resumed walking. By the time they reached Jasmine's apartment building, the rain had eased into a mist. David scanned the street out of habit before they went inside. Her building was old, peeling paint, buzzing lights in the hallway, but it was home. She unlocked her door, the familiar scent of lavender and coffee greeting them. "Sit," David said, motioning toward the couch. He disappeared into the kitchen, returning with 2 mugs of tea. She took hers, wrapping her hands around the warmth. "You're staying tonight?" "Of course." His eyes darted to the window, scanning the street again before settling back on her. "Jazz, I need you to understand something. What happened tonight isn't just about 2 bad cops. It's about a system that lets them think they can do whatever they want without consequences." "I know," she said softly. "It's just I'm one person. What am I supposed to do against a system?" David leaned forward. "You're my daughter. That means you don't fight alone." They didn't know it then, but trouble was already moving in their direction. 2 hours earlier, back at the precinct, Officers Keller and Morris sat in the locker room, dripping rainwater onto the tile. Keller slammed his locker shut. "Did you see the way that guy looked at us? Like he owned the street." Morris kept his voice low. "He's not just some random guy. You hear what she said? Delta Force. That's not the kind of man you pick a fight with." Keller sneered. "So what? He thinks he can scare us because he played soldier? Please. Guys like him are all talk once they're out of uniform." "You sure about that?" Morris asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because I've seen what those guys can do." Keller shook his head, the anger still simmering. "Doesn't matter. That girl made us look like fools in front of half the neighborhood. If we let this slide, we'll never hear the end of it." Morris hesitated. "You're talking about payback." "I'm talking about reminding people who's in charge," Keller said, a thin smile curling his lips. The next morning, Jasmine woke to the sound of her father's voice in the kitchen. He was on the phone, speaking in that clipped, deliberate tone she remembered from her childhood, the one that meant business. When he hung up, she padded into the kitchen, still in her robe. "Who was that?" "An old friend," David said. "He runs a community legal defense group. I told him what happened." Her stomach nodded. "Dad, I don't want to make this bigger than it already is." "It's already big," he interrupted. "Last night wasn't just about you. Keller and Morris have a history. My friends got files, complaints that were lost, body cam footage that mysteriously went missing. This is a pattern." Jasmine sank into a chair. "So what now? We sue them?" David shook his head. "Not yet. First, we gather proof. People need to see the truth with their own eyes." She sighed. "And in the meantime, I'm supposed to just go to work like nothing happened?" "No," he said, his voice steady. "You go to work like someone who knows she's being watched. Because you are. But you also go knowing I'm watching them right back." That night, as Jasmine walked to the diner, she felt the weight of his words. The streetlights seemed harsher, every shadow deeper. She caught sight of a police cruiser idling at the corner. Keller sat in the driver's seat, his eyes locking with hers for a moment before he looked away. She forced herself to keep walking. Inside the diner, the familiar clang of plates and the smell of frying bacon should have been comforting. But even here, she felt exposed. A couple of regulars gave her sympathetic nods. They'd seen the videos on social media. Someone must have posted them after all. During her break, she scrolled through her phone. The clip was everywhere, grainy, shaky, but clear enough to show Keller shoving her against the wall. The comments were a battlefield. "This is why we need reform." She was probably mouthing off. "Her dad is a legend." Fake. "She's just playing the race card." Her chest tightened. She tossed the phone aside and went back to work. 2 nights later, it happened again. She was locking up the diner when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned in. There was Keller, leaning against his cruiser, that smug grin on his face. "Evening, ma'am," he said, drawing out the word. Jasmine's heart pounded. "You have a reason to be here." "Public Street," he said with a shrug. "Just making sure you get home safe." Her voice shook, but she stood her ground. "I don't need your help." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "No, but you need to be careful. People who make trouble, sometimes trouble finds them." She stared at him, refusing to look away. "Are you threatening me?" He smiled. "Just talking." When she got home, David was waiting. She told him everything. His face darkened. "That's it," he said. "We're going public. Full story. Names, dates, evidence. If the department won't hold them accountable, we will." "What if it makes things worse?" Jasmine asked. He met her gaze. "Worse than living in fear." The next morning, David made calls. Journalists, activists, veterans he'd served with, men and women who owed him favors. Word spread fast. By the end of the week, there was a rally planned outside City Hall. Jasmine stood on the steps, looking out at the crowd. Signs waved. Chants echoed. Her knees felt weak, but when David squeezed her shoulder, she stepped up to the microphone. "My name is Jasmine Carter," she began, her voice trembling. "And 2 weeks ago, I was stopped, searched, and humiliated for one reason: because I'm a black woman walking home at night." The crowd roared. She told them everything about Keller, about the threats, about the system that protected men like him. And then she looked straight at the cameras. "To Officers Keller and Morris, this is me, not backing down." David stepped up beside her. "I spent years in the Army fighting for this country. I've seen the best of it and the worst of it. And I'll be damned if I let the worst of it wear a badge in my daughter's city." The crowd erupted. But Keller was watching from the sidelines, his jaw tight. And he wasn't finished. The roar of the crowd still rang in Jasmine's ears hours later. Even after the chants faded and the signs were lowered, the energy lingered, a kind of collective heartbeat, pulsing with outrage and hope. She had spoken her truth, and for a moment, she felt untouchable. But as David walked her back to her apartment, his eyes kept scanning the streets. "Don't get comfortable," he warned. "When you corner a dangerous man, he doesn't surrender. He lashes out." Jasmine wanted to believe that public pressure would keep Keller in check, that the badge he hid behind would crumble under the weight of the truth. But the glint in her father's eyes told her otherwise. That night, Keller sat in his cruiser, parked in the shadows of a narrow alley. The cigarette between his fingers burned low, the smoke curling into the damp air. Morris sat in the passenger seat, silent. "They made us look weak," Keller muttered. "First on the street, now in front of the whole damn city." Morris rubbed his face. "Keller, this is bad. The videos, the rally, the chief's breathing down our necks." Keller turned to him, his voice cold. "The chief can breathe all he wants. You think I'm going to let some waitress and her washed-up soldier daddy dictate how I do my job?" Morris hesitated. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," Keller said slowly, "it's time we remind them who runs this city after dark." 3 days passed without incident. Jasmine started to think maybe the storm was passing. She returned to the diner, tried to laugh with her co-workers, even went for a jog in the park, a habit she'd given up since the confrontation. But on the 4th night, trouble found her. She was locking up the diner when she heard the faint rumble of an engine behind her. A black SUV rolled to a stop at the curb. The windows were tinted, but she felt the eyes on her. A door opened. Keller stepped out, dressed in plain clothes. No badge, no body cam, just a shadow in the streetlight. "Evening, Jasmine," he said, his voice dripping with mock politeness. Her pulse spiked. "What do you want?" "Just to talk." He took a step closer, hands in his pockets. "You've been saying some pretty interesting things about me. Things that could ruin a man's career." Maybe you should have thought about that before you put your hands on me, she shot back. He smirked. See, that's the thing, you think this is about you. But it's bigger than that. People like you make noise, and you think it matters. But in the end, the badge always wins. A second figure emerged from the SUV Morris. He looked uneasy, but he didn't say anything. Keller leaned in, his voice low. You keep pushing, and you're going to find out just how easy it is for someone to disappear in this city. Jasmine's fingers itched to reach for her phone, but she forced herself to stand still, meeting his gaze. You think you scare me? My father's seen men like you in war zones. And you know what happens to them. Keller's smile faltered, just for a second. They don't get to walk away, she finished. By the time she got home, her hands were shaking. David was waiting, and when she told him what happened, his expression went from stone to steel. That's it, he said. No more warnings. He picked up his phone, dialing a number from memory. It's Carter, he said when the line clicked. I need eyes on 2 men, Keller and Morris. Round the clock. And get me their schedules, addresses, everything. Jasmine stared. Who are you calling? Friends, David said simply. The kind who don't miss. The next few days were a chess game. David's network veterans, community organizers, even a retired judge moved quietly, gathering evidence. Photos of Keller meeting with shady informants. Audio of him making racial slurs during a traffic stop. Records showing complaints buried by the department. And then came the breaking point. It was a Tuesday night when a teenager named Malik was arrested in the same neighborhood where Jasmine had been stopped. Witnesses said Keller slammed him to the ground without cause. The boy's mother went live on social media from the sidewalk, tears streaming as she shouted, "This is what they do. This is what they've always done." The video went viral in hours. Jasmine watched it on her couch, her stomach twisting. We have to do something, she told David. He nodded. We will, but not just for Malik. For everyone they've ever done this to. The next day, David held a press conference on the courthouse steps. He laid out the evidence, names, dates, documents, and handed copies to every reporter in sight. Jasmine stood beside him, her presence a silent testament to the truth they were exposing. This is not about one bad night, David said into the microphones. This is about a pattern of abuse, a culture of silence, and a system that rewards brutality. And we are done being silent. By evening, the department announced that Keller and Morris had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. It was something, but David knew it was just a stalling tactic. That night, Jasmine couldn't sleep. The city felt like it was holding its breath. Every creak of the building, every car passing outside made her tense. And then, just after 2 a.m., the fire alarm went off. She bolted upright, heart pounding. Smoke curled under her door. Dad, she screamed. David was already there, yanking her toward the fire escape. Move. They descended into the alley, coughing. Flames licked the windows of her apartment. Neighbors shouted and ran into the street. Across the road, parked in the shadows, was a familiar black SUV. Keller sat behind the wheel, his face illuminated by the orange glow of the fire. He didn't smile this time. He just watched, then drove away. By dawn, the fire department declared the blaze suspicious. Jasmine had lost almost everything she owned. This ends now, David said, his voice like ice. He's crossed the line from harassment to attempted murder. He called his contacts again, but this time there was no talk of press conferences or legal filings. This was something else, quieter, sharper. Dad, Jasmine said, her voice trembling. What are you going to do? He looked at her for a long moment. What I should have done the night I first saw him put his hands on you. Over the next 48 hours, the city seemed to shift. News stations ran stories on police corruption. Protesters camped outside the precinct. Anonymous tips poured into the mayor's office. And Keller? He vanished. Didn't show up for his shifts. Didn't answer calls. The department claimed they didn't know where he was. But David knew. On the third night, Jasmine sat alone in the safe house David had moved her to, listening to the rain tap against the windows. She didn't ask questions when he came back, soaked but calm. It's over, he said simply. She searched his face. What does that mean? It means he won't be bothering you or anyone again. Something in his tone told her not to press further. And though part of her wanted every detail, another part understood that some chapters closed without an audience. A week later, Keller's resignation was announced. Morris took early retirement. The department pledged reforms, though Jasmine knew better than to believe change came from promises alone. But something had shifted. When she walked through her neighborhood now, people stopped her not with pity, but with respect. Strangers thanked her for speaking out. Mothers told her their kids were safer because she hadn't backed down. And one evening, as the sun dipped low and the city hummed with the noise of ordinary life, Jasmine sat with her father on the diner's rooftop. "You still think one person can't fight the system?" David asked. She smiled faintly. "Maybe not alone, but with the right people beside you." She glanced at him. "You can make them listen." He nodded. "And sometimes, that's where real change begins." The rain had stopped. The air felt lighter. And for the first time in weeks, Jasmine believed it. The city moved on quickly, or at least, that's what it looked like on the surface. The headlines faded, the protesters went home, and the mayor's office announced yet another comprehensive review of police conduct. But in the quiet spaces, the story hadn't ended. Not for Jasmine. Not for David. 2 weeks after Keller's resignation, Jasmine was walking through the market when she felt it hat prickling on the back of her neck. She turned and spotted a man in a baseball cap watching her from the far end of the street. His face was shadowed, but his posture was too familiar. Her stomach tightened. She pulled out her phone and dialed her father. "I think I'm being followed," she said quietly. "Where are you?" His voice was instantly sharp. "Fifth and Alder. Market Street." "Stay where there are people," he ordered. "I'm on my way." 5 minutes later, the man was gone. David arrived seconds after, scanning the crowd like a hawk. "You saw him?" she asked. "No," he said, still searching the street. "But if he's smart, he won't come back." "What if it wasn't Keller?" she asked. "What if it's someone else, someone who wants to shut me up?" David's jaw tightened. Then they're going to learn the same lesson. That night, David made another call. This one wasn't to a journalist, or a lawyer, or an activist. It was to someone Jasmine had never met, a man named Torres, who spoke in clipped sentences and didn't waste words. "Loose ends," David said into the phone. "I don't want any." Torres only said, "Understood." A few days later, the news broke. Keller's body had been found in an abandoned warehouse outside the city. The official report said accidental overdose. Unofficially, everyone knew it wasn't that simple. Jasmine stared at the headline, her mind a whirlwind. "Was this you?" she asked David that night. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he poured them each a glass of water and sat across from her. Some men spend their whole lives thinking they can hurt people without consequence. Keller was one of them. The thing about consequence, Jazz, is it always arrives one way or another. She searched his face. "I wanted justice, but this." David's gaze softened. "Justice doesn't always wear a badge or sit in a courtroom. Sometimes it's just making sure the harm stops. For good." The city reacted in waves. Some mourned him. Others called it karma. The department issued a brief statement and moved on. But the effect rippled. Officers who had once walked with unchecked swagger now glanced over their shoulders. People in Jasmine's neighborhood began filing complaints without fear. It was as if Keller's absence had cracked something a small but undeniable shift in the balance of power. 3 months later, Jasmine was invited to speak at a community forum about police reform. She almost said no. She was tired of reliving the night it all started. But David encouraged her. "Your story isn't just about what happened to you," he said. "It's about what came after. People need to hear both." So she went. The room was packed, neighbors, activists, a few city officials sitting stiffly in the back. She told her story again, but this time, it wasn't raw with fear or rage. It was steady, clear. "I stood my ground because my father taught me that silence protects no one but the abuser," she said. "And because I knew deep down that I was worth defending." When she finished, the room stood in applause. Afterward, as they walked out into the crisp evening air, David handed her a small envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Something I've been holding on to," he said. "It's yours now." Inside was an old photograph, David in uniform, standing with his Delta Force team, and a much younger Jasmine on his shoulders, her tiny hands gripping his cap. On the back, in his handwriting, were the words, "Never back down." She looked up at him, her throat tight. "Why now?" "Because you've proven you don't need me to fight your battles anymore," he said. "But I'll always be here anyway." Life didn't return to normal because normal had been the problem all along. Instead, Jasmine built something new. She left the diner and took a job with the community legal defense group her father had introduced her to. She worked with teenagers, teaching them how to assert their rights, how to document encounters, how to survive in a system designed to test them. And every so often, someone would stop her on the street not to ask about Keller, but to thank her for standing up. One rainy afternoon, months later, she was walking home when a police cruiser slowed beside her. Her chest tightened for a split second until the window rolled down and a young black officer leaned out. "Miss Carter," he asked. "Yes. I just wanted to say what you did. It made a difference. For people like me, on this side of the badge, we need folks to hold us accountable too." She was too stunned to speak at first. Then she smiled. "Thank you, officer." He tipped his hat and drove on. For the first time, the sight of a cruiser didn't feel like a threat. Later that night, sitting on her balcony with David, Jasmine watched the rain bead on the railing. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't shown up that night?" she asked. He chuckled softly. "I don't let my mind go there. I just know I'd have found you, no matter what." She nodded, leaning back. "It's strange the worst night of my life turned into the start of something good. Not perfect, but better." David raised his glass. "To better." She clinked hers against his. "To never backing down." The rain kept falling, soft and steady, washing the streets clean for just a little while. And in that moment, Jasmine believed not that the fight was over, but that it was worth continuing. Because sometimes, change begins with one person refusing to stay silent. And sometimes, that's enough to start a revolution. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.